Well, here you go again. You are in the right place, you weekend road warrior. That's right. You're on Route 66, America's great Main Street, Mother Road, and you're heading right down to see Jim Hinckley, because he's got stories to tell, not only about the road, but about those cars that went all over the road and all over America. And once again, he's got stories that you've never heard before about the great American automobile and the great American road. You did it again. You are on the right road. Let's go.
On June 6, 1925, the Chrysler Corporation was formed by Walter P. Chrysler out of the ailing Maxwell Motors Corporation. But, surprisingly, when the story of Chrysler is told, seldom is the name Benjamin Briscoe mentioned. Even his succinct obituary never mentioned that Briscoe was instrumental in laying the foundation for Chrysler. Dateline, June 28, 1945, Detroit, Michigan. Free Press. Quote, Benjamin Briscoe, president of First Maxwell Company, financier that launched David Buick's automotive endeavors, founder of United States Motor Company, and founder of the American auto industry, dies. So, who was Benjamin Briscoe? Well, on this episode of Card Talk from the Main Street of America, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce listeners to the amazing Mr. Benjamin Briscoe. But before we set the Wayback Machine to the year 1867, I have a couple of notes to share. First, this program is a bit longer than normal, but it's hard to condense an exciting story like this. Second, this program was recorded last week. Currently, my son and his girlfriend are caretakers of the homestead and are holding down the fort at the Jim Hinckley's America offices to ensure we get messages or can respond to inquiries that require immediate attention in a timely manner. My dearest friend, partner, charming wife, and president, as well as sole member of the Jim Hinckley's America fan club, and I are on the road somewhere between McLean, Texas, and Russellville, Arkansas. If all goes as planned, Stan will work his magic, and next week's program will be recorded from the road as the Jim Hinckley's America Heartland Tour continues. Now, let's see if I can live up to my reputation as America's storyteller. Benjamin Briscoe was born in 1867 to a family of successful investors and inventors. At age 18, Briscoe, using his own money, established Benjamin Briscoe and Company that used metal stampings to manufacture buckets and barrels, a variety of cans, and even bathtubs. And that led to an association with David Dunbar Buick. Now, Buick was an innovative manufacturer of plumbing fixtures with more than a dozen patents to his credit, but profit remained elusive until Briscoe began supplying a wide array of stamped metal supplies on credit. And then Buick perfected and patented a successful process for fixing porcelain to metal. He created the porcelain bathtub. Shortly after entering the arrangement with Buick, Briscoe sold his business for a tidy profit, and he established the Detroit Galvanizing and Sheet Metal Works. Using a machine of his own invention, he began manufacturing corrugated pipe as well as sheet metal components for stoves, ranges, and furnaces. In 1900, Briscoe's brother Frank joined the company that was then reorganized as the Briscoe Manufacturing Company. The product line was expanded to include cast iron radiators and copper radiators used to facilitate the cooling of industrial engines. And that led to a project for Ransom E. Olds. Shortly after the brothers established their company, the Detroit Bank used by the Briscoes failed. Now, this incident illustrates Briscoe's unshakable confidence and serves as a lesson for all of us. Undaunted by this potential financial disaster, Briscoe brazenly, without introduction or endorsement, traveled to New York City and talked his way into a meeting with financiers at J.P. Morgan and Company that included J.P. Morgan himself. Well, his bravado paid off as Briscoe returned to Detroit with a commitment of a $100,000 investment in his company. Briscoe's involvement with Olds was rooted in disaster. The company's chief engineer, Jonathan Maxwell, had perfected an improved cooling system for the Oldsmobile. But a factory fire in 1901 had decimated the company, and that led Ransom E. Olds to purchase 4,500 radiators from Briscoe. Sensing opportunity, Briscoe offered a discount on the radiators if Olds would also contract his company for the manufacture of gas tanks. Meanwhile, in 1899, David Buick sold the plumbing supply company and began work on the development of a valve-in-head gasoline engine and a chassis. By late 1902, Buick had exhausted his funds, but his prototype, being built in partnership with Walter Marr, was not finished. So Buick turned to Briscoe, who agreed to forgive an outstanding loan, to pay off Buick's other outstanding debts, and to provide the funds needed to finish the prototype. As per this agreement, Briscoe would become the owner of the completed chassis, but Buick would use it to solicit investors needed to initiate manufacturing. Briscoe would eventually loan Buick an additional $1,500. To protect his investment, this arrangement included the stipulation that if the loan were not repaid within 12 months, Briscoe would become the sole owner of Buick Motor Company. Meanwhile, Briscoe met with Jonathan Maxwell, the former Olds engineer that was now planning to launch a company of his own. Briscoe asked Maxwell to evaluate Buick's project. Instead, Maxwell presented Briscoe with a business plan for the establishment of a company to manufacture an automobile that he had designed. This partnership would lead to the building of two automotive empires, one of which would become the foundation for Chrysler. It would also lead to the establishment of two companies that forever transformed the international auto industry, the founding of an automobile company with a quirky claim to fame, and Briscoe's diversification into an array of endeavors that would underpin many aspects of the infant auto industry. Impressed with Maxwell's plans and designs, Briscoe decided to divest himself of association with Buick. He quickly negotiated the sale of his interest in the Buick Motor Company to the owners of the Flint Wagon Works. One of these men was William Durant, who would later use Buick as the cornerstone for establishment of a company he named General Motors. In the closing months of 1903, the year Maxwell Briscoe Company was organized with a major investment from financier J.P. Morgan. By 1904, the company was prepared to begin the manufacturing of Maxwell's car that featured a two-cylinder water-cooled engine, a honeycomb radiator, a two-speed planetary gear set, shaft drive, and right-hand steering. Only 10 cars were produced and sold in 1904. The following year, 825 cars rolled from the factory. And with the introduction of a four-cylinder model in 1906, as well as a Dr. Maxwell runabout designed to meet the grueling needs of country doctors, and a 5-passenger touring car, sales soared. In 1907, nearly 4,000 cars were manufactured, and soon production was nearing 10,000 cars annually. While Maxwell concentrated on development, Briscoe focused on expansion that included establishment of manufacturing facilities in Indiana and Rhode Island. He also established a dealer network in the United States and Canada and an export department. The company's weak spot was marketing. That problem was resolved in a rather spectacular way when Cadwallader Washburn Kelsey, subject of a previous episode of Car Talk from the Main Street of America, joined the company. In 1902, Kelsey, with money provided by his father, established an auto car dealership and garage. Within 6 months, he had also secured rights for the sale of locomobile. Then, in 1906, he wrote a letter to Maxwell Briscoe requesting approval as the Maxwell dealer in Philadelphia. The franchise was negotiated directly with Briscoe, and after paying the $5,000 fee, Kelsey established a showroom and garage on Broad Street. Then he launched promotion worthy of P.T. Barnum and created the first filmed automobile commercials. Briscoe and Maxwell soon took notice, as Kelsey was selling more cars in Philadelphia than all the dealers in the United States combined. And so they hired him as the Maxwell Briscoe Company sales manager. By 1909, Maxwell was the third largest automobile manufacturer in the country. But Briscoe wanted to be number one, and he wanted to dominate a market in which there were literally hundreds of competitors. So, in early 1908, he headed a conference and presented a detailed plan for the merger of Maxwell Briscoe, Buick, Rio, and Ford, the four largest U.S. automakers, under the International Motor Car Company name. The ambitious project was stillborn when Henry Ford and Ransom E. Olds withdrew. William Durant, however, recognized the merits of the proposal and established General Motors. Undaunted, Briscoe used Maxwell Briscoe as the hinge-pin for a new corporation, United States Motor Company, that was established in December of 1909. Immediately after incorporation, Briscoe began purchasing companies like Columbia, Alden Sampson, the Dayton Motor Car Company, the Gray Motor Company, and Brush Runabout, which was owned in part by Frank Briscoe. The bidding war between Briscoe and Durant for the purchase of manufacturers and ancillary companies that produced auto parts would prove to be a disaster for both companies. The first year's success was encouraging, with the production of 15,000 Maxwells, 10,000 Brush Runabouts, and a combined production of 10,000 Stoddard Dayton, Columbia, and Alden Sampson trucks. But Briscoe did not rest on his laurels. Then, in late 1910, Briscoe launched United Motors International Limited to handle international sales of the vehicles manufactured under the United States Motor Company umbrella. The focus initially was on the British Commonwealth countries. To entice investors, a company prospectus in 1911 noted that United States Motor Company sales were up 57% from the previous year, and that the company had 18 manufacturing facilities with a combined floor space of 49 acres, had 14,000 employees, and was projecting production of 52,000 vehicles for 1912. The reality was not as rosy. The company was deeply in debt and seriously overextended. As a result, in 1912, the company went into receivership, and the banks appointed Walter Flanders as manager for the Receivers Committee to oversee reorganization. In 1913, the company was reorganized as Maxwell Motor Company, and operations were centralized at Highland Park, Michigan. As per the terms of the reorganization, all association with Benjamin Briscoe was severed. Durant's vision and management style were different from Briscoe's, but the result was the same. In its first 2 years, Durant used General Motors to knit together 30 companies, including Buick, Oldsmobile, Cadillac, and Oakland, and numerous parts manufacturers. But overextended and deeply in debt, in 1911 the board of directors forced Durant to quit the company. He would later regain control of General Motors through complicated maneuverings that included an arrangement with Louis Chevrolet and the creation of the Chevrolet Motor Company. Meanwhile, within 12 months of his departure from the United States Motor Company, Briscoe established Briscoe Ferrars with a manufacturing plant for production of the Ajax cycle car in Billancourt, France, to design and manufacture an automobile built by, quote, American standards. Production ceased when the factory was converted to the manufacturing of artillery shells during World War I. Next was the Argo car, an American version of the Ajax. However, by the time production ramped up, the cycle car craze had evaporated. That endeavor was followed by establishment of the Briscoe Motor Corporation with a factory in Jackson, Michigan. In October of 1915, just a year after the launching of the company, with the help of Tom Story, a director of the Brockville Atlas Automobile Company in Ontario, Canada, Briscoe launched a major expansion of Briscoe Motor Corporation to form the Canadian Briscoe Motor Company. This would prove to be a very short-lived endeavor that hindered development of the stateside Briscoe. The 1915 Briscoe was promoted as the first French car at an American price. Except for a single headlight flared into the radiator shell, there was little in appearance to differentiate the Briscoe from dozens of other vehicles being produced at the time. But the Briscoe was, and is, an oddity. As an example, the Cloverleaf Roadster model featured compressed, laminated papier-mâché body panels over wood framing. For 1916, two engine options were offered: a slightly improved four-cylinder engine or Fiero-manufactured V8. Brochures and advertisement noted, buy the 4, use it a month. If then you decide you want the V8, simply pay the difference and a small charge for installation work. Sales were relatively anemic, with only 8,100 vehicles built in 1916. But Briscoe was a man never short of ideas. After World War I, he returned to France and attempted to find investors for a company that would offer any community an opportunity to become a center of automobile manufacturing through the purchase of easy-to-assemble plans and parts, including Briscoe engines. That idea was stillborn. The final gasp for the Briscoe Motor Corporation came in 1920. Working with his chief engineer, Briscoe devised a radical plan for simplifying the manufacturing process and reducing the cost. These plans included reversible parts and one-size bolts to use in numerous components, identical clutch and brake castings, and one drill and bolt size for the entire chassis. Production was simplified, costs were dropped, but durability suffered. In mid-1921, Briscoe sold the entire enterprise to Clarence A. Earl, a Jackson industrialist. Earl continued building cars with parts on hand through the end of 1922 and sold the Briscoes under the Earl name. You can see some Briscoes and Earl and other cars manufactured in the Jackson area, including the Argo, at the Ye Old Carriage Shop in Spring Arbor, Michigan, a little town located just to the west of Jackson. Over the course of the next decades, Briscoe launched a Canadian company that refined crude oil with a process that he had invented, and he established a gold mining company in Colorado. Then he retired to an estate in Florida where he experimented with development of hybrid fruit trees. Well, that pretty much tells you the story of Mr. Benjamin Briscoe. The story of the Maxwell, Walter Chrysler, and the founding of Chrysler, well, that's a story for another day. It's just as exciting and just as interesting. But I don't want to wear out my welcome. So, as I've been beating my gums for a bit, it's about time to bid adios. First, however, I wanted to let you know that after October 23rd, Connie Eccles will have well-stocked shelves with autographed copies of my books at the iconic Wagon Wheel Motel in Route 66 in Cuba, Missouri. Bit of trivia there. The Wagon Wheel Motel, dating to the mid-1930s, is the oldest continuously operated motel on Route 66. And on the 26th, I will be checking out exciting developments in the neon-lit time capsule of Tucumcari, New Mexico. And while you wait for updates, check out the website, visit tucumcarinm.com. My friends, we have some great programs on tap, so become a subscriber, invite your friends. And if you're looking for a bang for the advertising dollar, give us a holler as we see nothing but growth in coming months. And don't forget, for more great stories, road trip inspiration, my appearance schedule, travel planning tools, or road trip inspiration, information about the contest that kicked off on October 1st, check out our website, JimHinckley'sAmerica.com. Stan, your turn. Anything else we need to discuss this morning?
Well, once again, James, You did it again. You found stories about the American automobile and told me things about some of the great people behind it, and I have never, ever heard those stories. We think we hear Henry Ford, of course, but there's all kinds of others. But you find some of the most remarkable, amazing people who were truly a century ago, before they even had the word entrepreneur, they were that in the American automobile industry. So good for you. Thanks for the story.
You bet. You bet. The idea here is to share America's story through the evolution of the American auto industry. And people like Benjamin Briscoe that we talked about today, there's so much to learn from the way they did things. The right way, the wrong way, there's lessons to be learned from these fellows, but it also makes for some really interesting stories, knowing more about how General Motors and these companies came about.
And, of course, every company has a little bit of history, and some of it's not always the best. So that's part of the game, too. Right.
Yeah, well, sure. And that's just there again. We're sharing America's story with all its warts and pimples. But that's what, when you put it all together, that's what makes this country great.
That's right.
That we, yeah.
That's right. And it is a great country. And that doesn't mean your country isn't, but we're proud of the fact, as you should be, of your place, your hometown, your country. But there is greatness to be found in many people in many places. But we just kind of highlight our own story here about Route 66 and the American car. That's what this program is about. James, I want to make sure that we emphasize that for the people who are out there who have these interests, we want to be their podcast. We want to help them and hear their stories. So kind of carry me through on that. Let's tell them that we want them to be a part of who we are and what we do.
Sure. Well, the stories we tell, we're not just talking about the past. We're also talking about the future. And if you have an interest in road trips, Route 66, cars, any kind of cars, motorcycles, trucks, we want to be your podcast. And we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear some of your stories because you are writing America's story. And, it's kind of like the past through tomorrow, future history stories, if you will. And we'd sure love to hear from these folks. If you've got car clubs, Route 66 associations, an interest in, like say, road trips and cars, that's what this is about.
That's what we're about, and we would love to have you be a part of our pit crew, part of our posse, whatever you want to call it. We'll be glad to have you involved, and we can even help you because we help people. There is no such thing as competition. If you want to start doing your own podcast too, Jim, you and I, we'll help them do it, won't we?
Sure, we'll help you get the word out there and get going.
Right.
The more the merrier.
That's right. Well, thank you very much. You are going to be on the road pretty soon, so give us a brief update on that, and then we'll say adios and happy trails.
In the post-apocalyptic world here, since 2020 turned everything upside down, it has been interesting. I've had trouble getting reservations straight and cancellations at the last minute, but I will be on the road. My entire schedule is posted on the Jim Hinckley's America website, jimhinckley'samerica.com. And we're going to have to figure out how to do a podcast from the road next week, but we'll work out the details on that. We'll get a podcast recorded from some nice cafe or some auto museum, or maybe we can find a nice waitress or museum curator to talk with us.
I hope that will happen because you know what? We'll find a way to make it happen, just like the American automobile, just like the American way. We can make it happen, right?
Yes, sir.
Hey, tell the road crew we're waiting for them to sing, but they're going to take us out, and we're grateful for them. And Jim, I'm very grateful for you, as I oftentimes get to say to people, I'm very glad you came into my life, and I thank you for that.
Sir, thank you.
Okay.
Speaking of the road crew, we'll give a shout out to Joe Lesh of the road crew. He's got a 75th birthday here in a couple of days.
Well, he better celebrate. That's right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Take care, my friend. Again, like you say, happy trails and drive safely.
We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Talk to you. Bye for now.
Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a 2-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.